Hello, friends and or foes, and welcome back. Today we will be reading all chapters of Having Merch Might Not Be Too Bad, actually. And here's the summary. Whenever someone looked at Shouta, they wouldn't immediately assume that he had money. In fact, with how he dresses and how he acts, some people are quick to assume that he was either poor or homeless, or both, before they even thought that he had two very well-paying jobs. Being a teacher at UA and a pro hero, he was comfortable and didn't even come close to struggling with cash ever in his time of being an adult with taxes. However, a few years into hero work, and he was about to get a lot more comfortable in terms of finance. Chapter 1. Merchandise, Phase 1. Whenever someone looked at Shouta, they wouldn't immediately assume that he had money. In fact, with how he dresses and how he acts, some are quick to assume that he was either poor or homeless, or both, before they even thought that he had two very well-paying jobs. Being a teacher at UA and a pro hero, he was comfortable and didn't even come close to struggling with cash ever in his time of being an adult with taxes. However, a few years into hero work and he was about to get a lot more comfortable in terms of finance. I'm sorry, what? Merchandise, Mr. Eraserhead, the suited man repeated. All heroes are required to make merchandise to promote themselves in the hero industry. But I'm an underground hero. I don't need to promote myself, and I definitely don't need merchandise. Besides, I've been doing fine for quite a few years without it. Shouta wanted to go home. It was supposed to be his day off, but instead he gets called into this meeting with a man who acted like he had a stick up his ass, telling him he needs to make Eraserhead merch when all he wanted was to curl up in his sleeping bag and take a long needed nap with his cat. The man sighed. Even so, the community needs to know who you are before they can trust you to swoop in and save them. Underground hero or not, merchandise can help build the people's trust and in turn make your job easier for you in the future. I don't really follow. Shouta stared at the man, feeling as lost as he was when he first stepped into the office. The man gave him a fixed look. Take Gang Orca for an example. People were terrified of him because of his looks. Before he made a merchandise and promoted himself as a hero, no one trusted him well enough to allow him to save them. After he promoted himself properly, only then did people start to realize that he was a hero that's supposed to save them and not a hero who's planned on attacking them. Does that make sense? Shouta really wanted to say no because he still didn't really understand why he of all people had to make merch. It's not like he looked that threatening, right? And besides, it's not like anyone was going to be there to watch him take down a villain at 3 a.m. And no one was going to care about some dingy-ass merch made by some hero that they've never seen before and will never see anyway. So any attempts of self-promotion would just go to waste in the long run. But he also really wanted to take that nap he planned on having. He wanted the meeting to be over and done, so he could just go home. He wanted to go back to his cat, to his bed, to the sweet place called Slumberland. Yeah, I get it. He did not get it. Good, the man stood up. I'll give you a week to come up with a design for a shirt. You can pay someone to do it or you could just do it yourself. It really doesn't matter, just as long as it's a good sellable design. Send the design to this email and we'll handle the production and the costs. Shouta took the piece of paper that the man handed to him with the email as he stood up as well, getting ready to just leave the office and never return. Oh yes, before you go, just know that you will be getting paid for the sales as well, which means that you'd be earning money every time someone buys your merchandise. Not like anyone would actually buy it anyway, Shouta thinks to himself. Okay, Thanks." He started walking out the door, pushing away the strong temptation to just throw the little piece of paper into the bin and not look back. It was going to be a long week. Quite honestly, it didn't really take long for Shouta to come up with a design, because contrary to popular belief, he actually aced his art exams back in high school, and he actually quite enjoyed art during his spare time. He just never told anyone about his passion for the subject because it never came up in conversation. The design that he came up with was simple and minimalistic. It was just a plain black dry fit t-shirt with dark gray sleeves. A small yellow text that read "eh" in his own handwriting was printed on the left breast of the shirt and printed largely on the black with a yellow rectangular border around it. Although he did have to explain to the Hero Commission that EH stood for Eraserhead, and that kids these days like the minimalistic concept on literally everything. It was easily accepted and immediately sent to the people in charge of production of said merch. It was a win-win situation for Shouta, as he knew that no one would actually link back the design to him unless he told them personally, and the Hero Commission just brushed it off as some minimalistic design that the public would love without a second thought. But nevertheless, Eraserhead merch was soon ready to be sold to the public. He didn't think it'd escalate this far. He didn't think that his shitty design would actually work. He also didn't think that people would give a shit about his dingy-ass merch, but they did. Well, in hindsight, he should have seen this coming with the design he sent in. He knew that the kids would like the minimalistic design, yet he still made it that way because he didn't want to be too flashy. He also knew that putting would seem funny and no one would know that it stood for Eraserhead, but instead think that it's just an ironic shirt. But he didn't think it'd go this far. Everywhere he went, every time he came across a teenager, they would be wearing that god-awful shirt, and now he actually wished that he didn't accept the request to make merch, because he would mentally cringe at the sight of yet another kid wearing his regret. But there was a really good side to all of this. The man that he was meeting with didn't lie when he said that Shouta would get paid for his efforts, and by God was he paid well. Every month he would get paid close to double of what he earned as a teacher at UA, just because a bunch of kids wanted to wear the latest trends, which, lucky him, just so happened to be his merch. With the income from UA Hero working whatever this bullshit was, he could buy multiple cat trees for his old tabby Mochi, and did not go broke. Hell, he could even afford to get a new, bigger place that allowed more than one cat. He could afford to raise at least 3 or 4 cats and still have enough money left to buy treats for the little bastards. This was heaven. The buzzing of his phone pulled him out of his cat-filled daydream and startled him where he stood. He pulled his phone out and squinted at the name displayed on the screen before answering it. What? Wow, I can really feel the love show. Dramatic as always. Okay, hello Zashi. Happy? Now, what is it? You don't usually call unless you want something or it's an emergency. Given how you answered, I don't think it's the latter. Well, I just wanted to tell you that I bought a new shirt and I wanted your thoughts on it. Shouta could feel the dread seeping into his soul. Hizashi was well known to buy whatever outfit that was currently trending just to send pictures of himself in said outfits for Shouta to judge. And with the shit show that he dragged himself into, he already knew where this was going, and he didn't want to see it. Actually, Zashi, I'm not in the mood right now. I actually have a bit of a headache going on, and Don't worry, I'll send you a pic so you can judge it later. Besides, we're still on for drinks with Nemuri, right? I can just wear the shirt there as well so you can see it in person. Hizashi yelled excitedly. Man, he really wanted Shouta to see his shirt for some reason. The shirt also kind of reminded me of you. Ah, there it is. Fine, Shouta sighed. I'll see you tonight. Yay, I'm just telling you first that you're going to absolutely love the new shirt. Shouta really didn't think so, considering the fact that he never really cared for what Hizashi wore unless it had a cat on it or it was paired with the tightest pants he owned. But he couldn't find it in himself to argue at this moment. Pocketing his phone, he decided that he had seen enough of the outside world and its crap for one day, and started speed walking back to his apartment. Might as well take a short nap before he had to meet up with his two friends tonight. Unless you knew Shouta well, you wouldn't think that he'd turn out to be the truthful blackout drunk that he is. But here we are. He would deny all claims of him spilling his deepest, darkest secrets while drunk only because he didn't remember what happened the night before. As of this moment, Hizashi was laughing his absolute ass off at the mere fact that the shirt that he was gushing over was merchandise of his best friend. The same best friend that hated the media with a burning passion and has said not once, not twice, but 15 times in the past that heroes don't need merchandise if they could just save people and do their jobs properly. You're kidding! Hizashi couldn't believe his ears. There's no way that the latest fashion trend in the whole of Japan was designed by you, of all people. This was too good. He needed to film this for proof, or Shouta would deny it for the rest of his life. Hizashi pulled his phone out and immediately started recording the drunk man in front of him. It's true, Zashi. They made me do it. I couldn't stop them. Shouta didn't look drunk, but the way he was acting, Hizashi knew he was long gone and that he wouldn't remember a single word he said tonight unless he had solid proof. And solid proof is what Hizashi would provide. Holy shit, and here Zashi was just a moment ago explaining to you why the shirt reminded him of you when you were just sitting here the entire time, just taking it. Nemuri chimed in. She was also struggling to hold in her laughter at the news, but she was doing a much better job than Hizashi, who was close to getting them kicked out of the bar because of how loud his quirk made him when he laughed. They're dumb. The commission said that I could pay someone to design it, but screw that. I like art. They can't take that away from me. Shouta really looked like he was about to pass out at this point, but he kept going. But now I can buy a bigger house for Mochi and Mochi friends. Mochi friends? Nemuri asked. What? Oh my god. Shouta gasped, his eyes widening. I can get friends for Mochi. Shouta looked like he had just seen the face of God himself. Okay, I think it's time for us to call it a night. Hizashi had tears in his eyes at this point. Come on, Sho, Hizashi said as he grabbed Shouta by the arm to hoist him up. Where are we going? To Mochi, Sho. To Mochi. Hizashi led him to the passenger seat of his car and opened the door before gently depositing him onto the car seat. As he got to the driver's seat, he could already see that Shouta had passed out and was clutching the little cat plushie that Hizashi left in the car for times like these. Hizashi smiled to himself as he started the car and drove away, Shouta snoring softly beside him. Chapter 2. Merchandise, Phase 2. It hadn't even been an entire year yet when the Hero Commission called him in for another meeting. Shouta really didn't want to go to this meeting considering what happened during the previous one, but he didn't really have much of a choice lest he pissed off the commission and risk losing his hero license for insubordination. I'm sure you've seen how well your merchandise has been doing in the market, Mr. Eraserhead. It was a woman this time, but Shouta still couldn't be bothered to learn their names. Yeah, didn't expect it to do that well if I'm being honest, he said while rubbing the back of his neck. Well, since it did so well, we were hoping that you'd come up with more designs for merchandise. Not just the shirts, but maybe other things, like stationery, or maybe even a figurine. Not a figurine, Shouta said quickly. He didn't want to think of people having little versions of himself in their homes. Besides, he didn't need people to put their attention on him when his whole hero career depended on villains not knowing who he was and what his quirk was. It doesn't need to be a figure of yourself, the woman said, quirking an eyebrow. It can be a figure of something that represents you, or even a plushie of something that you like. But it will have to be under the same branding. A plush? I don't know anything about plushies. What makes her think that? Shota's thoughts were cut off by the mental image of the cat plushie that Hizashi keeps in his car for him whenever he needed to take a nap. Hizashi had gotten it as a gift for Christmas from some long-lost relative, but decided that Shouta needed it more than he did. Can it be a cat plushie? He looked at the woman with hope in his eyes, and he sure as hell wished that the woman could see it. Yes, however, you would still be required to put your logo somewhere on it. The woman stood up and straightened out her skirt. But I'm sure you can figure something out in the meantime. You have 2 months for this next project. Don't let us down. Yeah, I'll think of something. Shouta stood up as well, making his way out of the room and wondering how in the world he was going to do this with as little effort as possible. He had absolutely no experience in designing plushies, let alone a cat-shaped one. Designing a t-shirt was easy enough, because all he had to do was search up a t-shirt template, draw whatever design he wanted, and send it in. Sure, there was a point where he had to make the decision on what material the shirt would be, but all he did was literally walk into the room and chose the softest shirt he could find. As much as he hated the idea of having merchandise, the least he could do was make sure it was of good quality. But he had no idea what counts as good quality for plushies at all. He would have to do extensive research on plushie material for this, something he had never thought he'd do during his time as a hero. It had been 5 days since the meeting, but to say that Shouta was at a loss was an understatement. He was still nowhere close to even comprehending what Google had to say about the different types of plushy stuffings and fluffy fabrics, even though he had stared at his computer screen for hours on end just reading up on what would feel nice to hold in a child's arms. He sighed before he gave up on his research spree and leaned back on his chair, closing his irritated eyes to stop them from drying from the light of his computer. How am I ever going to get this done at this rate? Sure, I have 2 months, which is a long ways to go, but I don't even know where to start. Shouta was tired. Maybe he shouldn't have suggested plushies as an option for merchandise. Shouta suddenly felt movement against his calf and looked towards the ball of fur that was winding itself around his legs. He bent down and picked Mochi up before cradling her like a baby, pressing her close to his chest. At least you don't have to go through all this, he said while rubbing his cheek on top of her head, her purring gradually getting louder. All you do is sit there and be cute before begging me to feed your fat ass. Mochi looked up at him and meowed before plopping her paw against his face. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I should rest for a bit. How about a nap, huh? You'd like that, won't you? Shouta stood up from his office chair and started walking towards the bed, still bringing Mochi along with him. Mochi just meowed at him again. He carefully crawled into bed and got under the covers with Mochi. Plushie making would just have to wait for another day. The quaint little cafe he was in was surprisingly busy today. There were more people than he had ever seen, and the entire place was just bustling with energy, but none of the sounds that the patrons were making could break him out of his focus towards his tablet. On any normal day, Shouta would regularly be going to the cafe to have a coffee or some tea as he sat down to grade students' assignments, sometimes even having a cake or two to go with it. He had been to the place enough times that the staff all knew him by name. However, today was different. Today he sat in the little cafe drawing for hours on end, trying to come up with the perfect cat design to turn into a plushie. A plate with a muffin was placed on top of his table with another cup with what seemed like chamomile tea. Shouta looked up confused because he was sure that he hadn't ordered anything the past hour. I didn't order this. I know, Mr. Aizawa. It's on the house, the waiter said with a small smile. You've been sitting there for 4 hours now, and we all thought you could use a small treat. You're always so busy working whenever you visit. Shouta was shocked, to say the least. Before he started coming to this cafe, he would sit at the one closer to the school to do his work. But after an hour or two, he'd be chased away because the owner thought that his ragged looks was bad for business. Oh, thanks. He didn't really know what to say. He didn't think that any other people would like him enough to even do something like this besides his own small group of friends. No problem, Mr. Aizawa, said the waiter as he walked back to the counter to serve some more drinks to the other customers. Shouta couldn't resist the small smile on his face that he hid behind his capture scarf. He went back to his drawing feeling a bit lighter than he did in the morning. Maybe he'd bring Hizashi here sometime. No, I think it should be a little bit more rounder in the cheeks and a bit chubbier in its torso. Yeah, maybe you're right, Shouta said as he squinted at the drawing. It does look a bit cuter if it's rounder. Well, it's meant for people to cuddle with, so I'd assume that it'd be bigger in size, Hizashi said thoughtfully. It'd be cute as hell as a major plus, though. Hizashi was laying on Shota's couch while Mochi kneaded biscuits into his stomach. He came over earlier in the morning to make sure that Shouta actually ate before throwing himself into his work. Luckily for him, he was able to catch Shouta in the middle of designing new merch, something that he didn't think he'd ever see in his entire life. Are you gonna put it in clothes? I can, Shouta asked. Like a tiny shirt? Yeah, you could even put it in your shirt if you want. Shouta thought it was a great idea. This way, he didn't need to put in as much effort as he initially needed to. All he had to do was put the thing in a tiny version of his shirt and call it a day. He also didn't need to rack his brain to come up with a way to put his logo strategically on the cat without ruining it in the process. I'll go with that then. Soon after, the design was sent in and a racer cat was sent out into the world. It happened again. The shirts were a huge hit before, but now, a really soft cat plushie wearing the shirt, even better. The public was so in love with the cat that it practically sold out in one night after all the pre-orders from their promotion the week before. Everyone wanted an cat, yet none of them knew why its name was Racer Cat in the promotion. Luckily for Shouta, they didn't question it. Walking towards his class, he could hear all the students scrambling to get to their seats after the bell had rung, not wanting to get threatened with expulsion from their homeroom teacher just for being rowdy. As he got to the door, he could hear Kaminari's voice speaking very loudly. How did you manage to get one so quick? That thing sold out within an hour of it being out. Shouta really hoped they weren't talking about the cat. Anything but that. I tried to get one, but the website crashed for me because of how many people were on it. I worked hard, and cats are cute. Todoroki replied with his usual monotonous tone. Shouta opened the door and walked in, clutching his sleeping bag to his side, along with his class materials for the day. Good morning. Mr. Aizawa, look at this cat. Kaminari snatched the cat plush from Todoroki's table and lifted it up to show him. You like cats, right? Look at how cute this plushie is. It was his cat. Shouta had designed the cat to look like Mochi, just because he thought that everyone needed a Mochi in their lives. He already had one of those plushies at home, as the production company sent him one for free, considering the fact that he was the designer of the thing. He didn't think that any of his students would actually have one of it, because he was told that it sold out quite quickly, but of course it was Todoroki who owned one. He always had his ways of obtaining what he wanted, namely his father's credit card. Yes, it's very cute, Kaminari. Now give it back to Todoroki and take your seat. Shouta sighed. Of course he thought it was cute. It's Mochi. Shouta had the small temptation to just give Kaminari his own little Mochi, just because he looked so distraught about not owning one. Maybe he could give Kaminari his own plushie, considering the fact that he already had the real Mochi at home. Might as well. He looked so sad without one. Maybe I can just put one on his table in the morning before any of the students arrive. Shouta started classes as usual, putting the cat plushie at the back of his mind. That's a problem for tomorrow's Shouta. If anyone walked into 1A today, they'd see an extremely happy Kaminari clutching a little cat plushie to his chest. There was also a small card on the table that read, "Heard you wanted one." But if anyone asked Shouta, he had nothing to do with it. Chapter 3. Merchandise Phase. The Kids Find Out. On the news last Tuesday, Izuku saw that an underground hero had funded an entire homeless shelter in Naruhata all by himself. Based on all the extensive research that Izuku had done in the past, he knew a few things. 1. Underground heroes don't earn as much money as daylight heroes. 2. Unless said hero had 2 jobs, they wouldn't be able to fund a whole homeless shelter by themselves without any outside help. 3. The only underground hero with 2 jobs was Mr. Aizawa, according to all the underground hero forums he was on. Miss Joka doesn't really count, considering the fact that she was a semi-daylight hero. Even with all this information, the only conclusion that he could get was that Mr. Aizawa somehow had enough money to pay someone to build a whole homeless shelter. It wasn't like he thought that Mr. Aizawa was broke. Far from it, actually. It was that he knew almost exactly how much money that Mr. Aizawa earned from both the hero work and teaching at UA. The sum of money that he got to wasn't even close to enough to funding the whole shelter. Granted, the shelter wasn't that big or grand, but a whole building was still expensive. Izuku didn't like jumping to conclusions, but he jumped anyway. He had absolutely no proof that it was Mr. Aizawa that funded the shelter, but it definitely seemed like something he would do. And the area was definitely not a coincidence. He knew that Mr. Aizawa was posted at Naruhata for a few years and had helped quite a few vigilantes before moving to Musutafu to start his job at UA. He only knew this much about Mr. Aizawa because apparently he got drunk once and told All Might about it, even though the man was there himself for some of the events, who then proceeded to tell Izuku about it during one of their breaks from training. Izuku needed more evidence, but he also needed help in getting said evidence. So, who better to ask than one of his best friends, Todoroki? If there was anyone who could help him gather information on heroes, it would be him. Picking up his phone, he immediately dialed Todoroki's number. "Todoroki, I need your help. Did Stain break out of Tartarus? Are you hurt? What happened? What's your location? Do I need to bring backup? Is it—" "No!" Izuku cut him off. Sometimes Todoroki was worse then Izuku when he was worried about his friends. I just need your help on something. I'm fine. Oh, why didn't you start with that then? Todoroki asked, like as if he wasn't the one who started worrying in the first place. What do you need help with? Did you hear about that homeless shelter funded by an underground hero? Izuku asked. It would be nice if they were on the same page before getting down to business. Oh, yeah, the one by Mr. Aizawa, right? Yeah, wait. How did you know it's Mr. Aizawa? Did Todoroki already know about it? Did he already have evidence? This is great. It makes his job so much easier. It's obvious, isn't it? He's an underground hero. But where's the evidence? Just because he's an underground hero, that doesn't immediately mean it's him, you know. This was getting him nowhere. If he wanted to prove that Mr. Aizawa was in charge for all of this, he would need more information than the ones at hand. No, I have more, Todoroki replied. I was actually on my way to visit my mother when I caught him on the train the other day. I asked him where he was going, and he said he was going to Naruhata. He didn't say what for, but I just see him on the train almost every weekend now, going to Naruhata. What a coincidence that the same week I caught him on the train for the first time, the homeless shelter was announced on the news. This was a huge gold mine. Now all he had to do was maybe follow him. Not in a stalkerish way. Maybe he could follow Todoroki when he visits his mom. And then maybe get off at one stop before Naruhata and see for himself. But if he gets caught, he'd be in big trouble. He might even get expelled. But not if he's smart about it. Midoriya. Huh? Oh, sorry. Were you saying something? I was asking you if you wanted to come with me to visit my mother this weekend, so we can follow Mr. Aizawa. If you want, of course, Todoroki suggested. Yeah, sure. I was planning on maybe following him either way, but maybe having someone with me would be a lot easier. Then it's settled. I'll meet up with you at the station at 10. He's usually there around that time. Maybe we can trail him from there. This was a bad idea. All they had for disguises were just hoodies, face masks, and sunglasses, which, to be fair, made them look a little too suspicious. So maybe following their teacher like this wasn't that great of an idea, but they were already too far in to back out now. Are you sure about this? My mother did say that we looked like we were about to mug someone rather than have a nice day out in another town. Todoroki was right. Izuku knew he was right. Everyone knew he was right. Maybe we shouldn't wear the sunglasses. But if we don't wear the sunglasses, he'd recognize us immediately. Not many people have dual-colored eyes and a scar over their face, like you do, and not many Japanese people have green eyes and exactly 4 freckles on each cheek like me. You're right. This is a better idea. They saw their teacher get off at his stop and started following him from behind. Aizawa started walking faster and checking his watch every few minutes. He kept walking and making turns before stopping in his tracks. I know you two are following me. Shit, this was it. This is where Midoriya Izuku would die. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, All Might. We're not following you, Todoroki retorted. Yes, you are, Todoroki. You too, Midoriya. Aizawa turned around to face them before continuing. I already noticed the moment you both stepped onto the... Then why didn't you say anything? Izuku asked, pulling off his mask and sunglasses. If you noticed, then why didn't you stop us? Because I actually wanted to see how far you would follow me until you realized that I was just walking in circles this entire time. Aizawa pointed to the small convenience store just in front of them. We've passed that store about 3 times now, yet neither of you noticed. Maybe I need to pump out more situational awareness classes in the future. Both Izuku and Todoroki pulled off their hoods and stashed their masks and sunglasses into their pockets. They didn't know what to do now. They were definitely going to get into trouble for this, but they still didn't get to find out what they came here for in the first place. If you really want to know where I'm going, you could have just asked, You don't need to look like a bunch of muggers just to find out what I do during my off time. Aizawa sighed. He was way too tired for this and clearly too tired to reprimand the two kids. You could come with me if you want. The way he said it made it seem more like a question than a statement, making the two of them unsure if their teacher actually wanted them to follow him or not. They followed him anyway. "Welcome back, Mr. Eraserhead," said a small, cheerful voice. A small woman walked out of what seemed like an office off to the side of the hallway that they were standing in. "Oh, who are these two?" "This is Midoriya and Todoroki. They're just visiting today," Aizawa explained. "Visitors? Usually we get volunteers, not so much visitors, though." "Yeah, well, I caught them following me from the station earlier. It's okay, they're just some of my students." Aizawa then turned to them. "Come on, let's go." The room that they walked into was lined with a bunch of bunk beds on one side and lockers on the other. Quite a number of people were in the room, and they all seemed like they were getting ready for lunchtime. "Welcome to my homeless shelter," Aizawa said while gesturing vaguely to the space. "You live here?" Todoroki asked. "No, what?" Aizawa turned to look at Todoroki with a confused look. "I don't live here, Todoroki. I own this building." "I knew it," Izuku blurted out. "You what?" "I was wondering which underground hero could have possibly funded a whole homeless shelter by themselves, and I narrowed it down to you because you're the only one with 2 jobs. You do realize I'm the only underground hero with 2 jobs that you know personally, right? Aizawa rubbed a hand over his face. There are actually plenty of underground heroes with 2 jobs, but you wouldn't know them because they aren't meant to be known. Oh. Izuku felt his face get warm. This was a little embarrassing if he was being honest. But where did you get all the money to run this place? Todoroki asked with a tilt of his head. It was a good question because Izuku wanted to know as well. Their teacher trailed off with soft mumbles. Izuku had never seen his teacher this bashful before in his life. Heck, he didn't think that Mr. Aizawa could get embarrassed. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Todoroki was really trying his luck today, wasn't he? But oh well, if he died, at least Todoroki would die with him. You know what? I think it would be better if I just showed you. Aizawa started walking towards the exit, occasionally waving or saying hi to some of the patrons in the building. Izuku and Todoroki followed after him again, wondering what could possibly be so important to the point that their teacher could earn so much money from it. The 3 of them ended up in front of a shop well known for selling licensed hero merchandise. The shop sold everything from plushies to kitchen utensils to lawn mowers, you name it. And all of it was hero-themed. What are we doing here? Isn't this a hero shop? Izuku asked. Yes, don't ask any questions until I show you what I wanted to show you. Aizawa led them into the store and went straight to the trending section. Izuku had no idea what they were doing here, but they just passed a limited edition All Might figurine that he was planning to get. Although he really wanted that figurine, he also really wanted the cat. He heard that they were going to restock soon, so maybe he should save up on that instead. Aizawa suddenly threw a shirt in both of their directions, catching them off guard. Are we here to shop for clothes, Mr. Aizawa? Izuku said while prying the shirt off his face. No, I want you to look at the logo of that shirt and tell me if the handwriting looks familiar or not. They both stared at the shirt for a few long minutes before their eyes widened. Their heads shot up to their teacher in pure shock. "This is your handwriting," Izuku shouted. He was in shock. He didn't even know that the shirt was licensed hero merch until now, and had just assumed that the shirt and plushie was being sold at that shop because it was so widely trending in Japan. "Yup," Aizawa said while popping the pea. He turned his head to avoid their gazes as they stared at him in awe. "So, the cat's yours as well?" Todoroki asked. He really loved that cat. It was so cute, and it was one of the softest things he had ever held in his entire life. He had sat in front of his computer for an hour just waiting for the timer to go off so he could hit the order button and spend his father's money on something that really mattered. Yeah, Aizawa still didn't want to look at them out of pure embarrassment. He never thought that he'd have to tell any of his students about this anytime soon, but here he is now, showing them why he was loaded as hell. "That's so cool!" Izuku ran over to Aizawa, a shirt in hand. "Can you sign mine when we get to school on Monday?" "Mine as well," Todoroki chimed in. "Can you sign the tiny shirt on the cat as well?" Aizawa was at a loss for words. These kids wanted his autograph. His? He became an underground hero for a reason, which is to avoid any and all social interactions with people who could turn out to be his fans. But he never expected his small fan base to be his students. He thought that some of them hated him with how harsh he was on them during some of their trainings. Sure?" Aizawa said it with a bit of uncertainty, still unsure whether his kids were just messing with him or not. "This is so cool," Izuku said again. "We have official Eraserhead merchandise. I always thought that I'd have to make my own if I couldn't find any." "You're excited about my merchandise? Why?" He really wanted to know why this kid was excited by him of all people. Usually when people saw him, they were a bit apprehensive about whether or not he was even a hero. "Yeah, 'cause you technically fight quirkless and all, and I was kind of a late bloomer. So I really look up to you because you were what I hoped to be if I never got a quirk. You turned out to be one of my favorite heroes because of this." Izuku was a little scared that telling Aizawa about him being a late bloomer to get a quirk would affect the way he saw him. But when he looked back up at his teacher, all he saw was a softness that he had never expected from Aizawa. Aizawa wanted to cry. He could feel tears coming up in his otherwise dry eyes, but willed himself to hold it in. This kid actually looked up to him and considered him one of his favorite heroes, something he never thought he'd hear ever in his entire life. "Oh, I didn't know you saw me that way." Aizawa nervously rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't think you liked me all that much, actually." "Well, I think of you as a second father to me." This shocked Aizawa a bit as he looked at Todoroki. "Everyone knows that my father isn't the best, but you're the closest thing I've gotten to one in a long time." "Same here. My dad left after I was diagnosed quirkless at the age of 4 and has never been back since. All Might is kind of like a father to me, but he can't be around all the time, so you're the next best thing," Izuku said with a small smile, looking back down at his shoes. Aizawa stared at them for a while before sighing. He then did something that neither of them could predict. He pulled the both of them into a hug. The both of them stiffened up at the sudden contact before melting into the embrace, burying their face into his chest. They didn't care that they were currently in a public store where anyone could see them. They needed this moment to themselves. On Monday, Izuku and Todoroki were both showing off their shirts and cat that had been autographed by the designer himself. If anyone noticed that Aizawa was a bit more happy that day, they chose not to mention it.